Mock Draft Mondays right here on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight. And here's our latest mock draft from Josh Edwards. And it's a doozy. Travis Hunter, #1 to the New England Patriots. How about the Titans getting the #2 pick and not going with the quarterback there, going with Tetairoa McMillan out of Arizona. Cam Ward to the Browns at 3, and Shedeur Sanders still going to the Giants at #4. Let's get to it. Chris Hassel joined by Josh Edwards, Ryan Wilson, and Mike Renner, who has said for months that Hunter would be a perfect fit for the Patriots. But Josh, how should the Patriots weigh taking their man there, #1, or trading down, maybe getting even more assets and getting him a little further down the board?
Yeah, we had this conversation last year with the Patriots because we didn't think they were in a position to take a franchise quarterback. They have a lot of needs. They need offensive linemen. They need wide receiver help. Fast forward to this season, Drake May has looked fantastic, but he just doesn't have enough around him. So if you throw in a player like Travis Hunter Jr., who has been dynamic after the catch this year, he's a downfield threat. You throw him into that offense, you give May a little bit of help. Now you just have to worry about the offensive line. So if you're able to trade back, still get a really high-quality wide receiver, still get a really high-quality offensive lineman and get some extra picks, I think that would be the right move. But we've got another week to see if the Patriots are even going to hang on to that #1 overall selection.
Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, here's the thing, and I think you make a good point, Josh, and there's a lot to like in this mock draft, but I'll just say this, and you touched on it. If you're going to be the Patriots, you want to give the impression that you are interested in trading down, and if you get stuck, you take Travis Hunter, and you feel great about it. I think sometimes they get a little cute, and I'll just go back to last Sunday when they saw Ladd McConkey run all over the field against them. They had an opportunity to draft Ladd McConkey, and they didn't, and I'm sure they regret that, but your other point is also important. The last 2 drafts, they have drafted offensive linemen, interior offensive linemen. They need tackles in the worst way. So if you could move down to, say, 7 or 8, maybe the Raiders want to move up as we currently sit here, and you're able to still get a Tetairoa McMillan and an offensive lineman, whether it's Kelvin Banks Jr. or Will Campbell, that's a grand slam. I think Travis Hunter is the best player in this class, and it may not even be close, but if you have an opportunity to stockpile picks, because they have needs just about everywhere, they have Christian Gonzalez, they have Keon White, they have Drake May, and that's it, then you go trade down and try to improve the team as much as possible.
I'll just add that I think, especially in this draft class, you don't want to trade down too far if you're the New England Patriots. I'm listening to trade deals, but I'm listening to trade deals to go to like 3 or 4, because after that, we're going back into the top 10. It's not going to be like a blue chip, high-end prospect type of player. There just aren't that many in this year's class. So you can stay somewhere in that top 5 and pick up like a future first or a second and a third. I'm very interested in that if I'm New England Patriots. Yeah,
based on everything you guys have said, it's really only 2 quarterbacks that are going to be taken in the top 10 and maybe even the entire first round. You got the Tennessee Titans, Josh, at #2, not going with a quarterback. You have them going with Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona, uber talented. But in this scenario, in this mock, are you believing that the Titans stick with Will Levis another year?
No, this is not a Will Levis endorsement. It's not a Mason Rudolph endorsement. What happens before the draft is free agency. So one thing that I laid out in the intro is that the Titans could be in the mix for Sam Darnold if he becomes free. I feel a little bit less confident that that's going to happen after seeing the way that his teammates rallied around him after yesterday's win. I think Minnesota's probably going to bring him back at this point. But in the specific scenario, I looked at the Titans as a potential fit for Sam Darnold in free agency, which means unless you go the route that Atlanta went last year, signing Kirk Cousins, then drafting a quarterback in the 1st round, now you have the opportunity to go take that #2 overall pick and get another player. Because last year they were very aggressive in adding talent to this roster. They went out, they traded for Ernest Jones, they got L'Jarius Sneed, they signed Calvin Ridley. If you still believe in the roster and the talent that you accumulated, let's drop Sam Darnold in here and then get him a weapon in the draft and see what we're able to accomplish.
I have to agree with Josh in that I don't think quarterback has to be the play here. Even though they're drafting #2 overall, one, I think there's that big of a gap between Cam Ward and others. Now in this mock draft, obviously, Cam Ward's available, but to what he said there, that they may see this, think someone's going Cam Ward at 1, and say we're going to go elsewhere via free agency or via trade because this roster still stinks. If you go any rookie quarterback, he's going into a situation where he has no one to throw to. He has one of the worst offensive lines. Pretty much every metric of receiver separation puts them in the bottom 5 in the NFL, and offensive line performance puts them in the bottom 5 in the NFL. When that's the case, you could have a Bryce Young-esque situation on your hands, no matter who it is that you're throwing behind that offensive line, that even if they turn out good, it might not be good for a few years if you don't put the talent around him. So I do agree. You don't have to go quarterback at number 2 if you're the Tennessee Titans. It's another team that has such a bad roster that I may look elsewhere if I'm them.
Yeah, it's not even a Bryce Young situation. It's a Will Levis situation. Like, it's happening in real time, and he's gotten benched for Mason Rudolph. But it's funny you mentioned Bryce because don't forget, remember back in week 2, we're like, okay, the Bryce experiment's done in Carolina. Trade him to Miami or wherever and let him sort of refine his career. Turns out 6 weeks on the bench did him some good, and he's playing like he's back at Alabama for the most part. Now, the offensive line's played better in Carolina for sure, and that's helped, and he's got guys getting open. Adam Thielen looks like he's 23 instead of 33. But in terms of the Tennessee Titans and picking number 2 overall, I think you guys are both right. If this were last year's draft and they had the 2nd overall pick, this is a no-brainer. I don't care that you took Will Levis the year before. You're taking Jaden Daniels or Drake May or maybe even Michael Penix Jr. if he's there because that's how much better that last year's class was than this year's class. That said, Hassel, I'm telling everyone and their brother from now until the draft, if I'm the Tennessee Titans, that I'm taking a quarterback and then trying to pull a trade-down scenario where you get some draft picks as well because, to Mike's point, they are not great on most spots in this roster.
Well, in this scenario from Josh, which you can find the whole mock at CBSSports.com, you don't have a quarterback going 1 or 2, so Cam Ward falls 3 to the Browns. Josh, you mentioned that Tennessee might be out there looking to sign somebody like a Sam Darnold. Do you think the Browns could be out there looking for a veteran as well?
Yeah, I think that's the ideal scenario. Kirk Cousins has a relationship with Kevin Stefanski dating back to their days with the Vikings. So that's a possible fit there as he's probably looking to get out of Atlanta now that they have benched him. Cleveland, you know, they're in this hole where they have Deshaun Watson. Obviously, it has not worked out, but they're still on the books for his contract for the foreseeable future. So the only way that you can kind of supplement the quarterback room without investing a lot of assets into it, obviously Sam Darnold is going to be very costly whether he returns to Minnesota or signs elsewhere. If you get a guy like Kirk Cousins who is already being paid by Atlanta and then you still go out and you get a rookie quarterback, you're addressing the present, but you're also addressing the future, and you're giving Myles Garrett that competitive chance that he's been looking for, because right now they simply do not have it with Deshaun Watson. So I think it's likely they look for a veteran, and they could also still look for a rookie in this draft as well.
Many Giants fans thought that win over the weekend really blew their chances of getting a Cam Ward, of getting a Shedeur Sanders. But in this scenario, you have Sanders going 4 to the Giants. I was going to ask you why you had him falling, but I pulled up your mock, and it says you might not even see him in the top 5 at this point. Why is that?
I think it's just how these teams are going to view these quarterbacks. It's not going to be a case where every team loves each of these quarterbacks because, as Ryan alluded to earlier, this class is not as strong as last year's. Cam Ward probably would have been the 5th quarterback in last year's class in terms of my rankings. And Shedeur is even a little bit farther because we haven't seen the level of consistency that we had seen from Michael Penix or Bo Nix a year prior. So you're talking about a projection here. And if you're looking, if you're the Giants with a top 5 pick, you better be pretty confident in how that's going to play out, because the last time you did it, it led you to where you are right now, back in the top 5, moving on from Daniel Jones. So I think teams are going to be very split on how they view this quarterback class.
If the Giants do not take a quarterback in this draft, everyone in that building should be fired, hired, and then fired again. You have to get a quarterback. I understand this class isn't as good as last year's class, but you're in no position. Beggars can't be choosers, as the old saying goes. I'm of the opinion, I'll be interested to hear what Mike thinks, that both these quarterbacks are gone in the top 5. And the Giants are lucky. I said a week ago that the Raiders had the worst win in franchise history by falling out of the top 5, and now they're at 8. This was close to one of the worst wins in Giants history. It was fun to watch in a vacuum, but they don't need to go out there and beat the brakes off of the Colts and help their draft position that way. But they're still 4th, and they're going to still have an opportunity to take a quarterback. They may have to trade up a spot or 2, depending on what the folks behind them do or what the Tennessee Titans and Browns do, but they're still in position, and they have to take a quarterback no matter what here, even if it costs them a little bit to move up.
I could see the musical chairs at the quarterback position this offseason ending up to where not everyone has to force one, maybe in the top 3. But I do think if the Giants don't address quarterback heading into the draft, they're taking one, and more likely than not going to try to move up to do so because of just the need at that position and what it does for your team, and the fact that they're not that bad offensively. Like you saw it on Sunday, what Malik Neighbors can do, what Darius Slayton can do, Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, there's talent there. Tyrone Tracy at running back, and how dynamic he is. It's just the O-line got banged up. They'll be better next year. Just getting Andrew Thomas back at left tackle. It is just the quarterback. This isn't like what we were talking about with Tennessee, where they have so many other needs, or with New England. There really is just one need in New York for the offense. It's the quarterback position. And so if they can figure that out and plop that guy who's a rookie at that position and have him hit for the next 4 seasons cheaply, well, you can contend with the Eagles in the NFC that way.
Done so many mock drafts with you guys where the Raiders have pretty much had their pick of either Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, and we know they need a quarterback. They lost out on that with the 6 quarterbacks going in the top 12 in this past season's draft. But no team has done more damage to their draft status than the Raiders over the last couple weeks with back-to-back wins. They go from the top almost out of the top 10. They're down there at 8, Josh. What are the options in that area going to look like?
Well, I don't think there's going to be any quarterback options if you wait until that point in the first round. I think you're going to have to move up the board if you want to secure one of those top quarterback options. And I think Las Vegas is the perfect candidate to make that aggressive type of move this year, because they have been stuck in this quarterback purgatory for the last couple of years. They've trotted out their Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell this year, Desmond Ridder, Jimmy Garoppolo. They've had so many quarterbacks the past couple of years that I don't think you can allow this to chance again. It's almost like when the Panthers found themselves in desperation a couple of years ago, traded up to number 1 overall to get Bryce Young. I think the Raiders may be in a similar position of desperation to move up the board. But if you think they're gonna be able to sit there at number 8 overall and still get their quarterback of choice, I think that's just not reality.
Josh, you had them taking Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan. I like the pick, but again, those are the 2 worst wins in franchise history for the. I mean, they kill their chances at the 1st overall pick. The other issue is Tom Telesco, the GM, does not trade up. He usually stays put and just takes whatever falls to him. Now, Mark Davis and/or Tom Brady might be in his ear saying, "Look, we got to do something differently." And I would imagine that Tom Telesco understands that, given how the quarterback situation has played out this year. But we just went through the free agents available. Sam Darnold almost certainly won't be there. Maybe Bomb Trady can come out of retirement and play quarterback for them, because they have very few options at this point unless they're going to wait until day 2 to get a quarterback, and that rarely works out long term. So Tom Telesco is going to have to change. Here's the list of guys that could potentially be available as free agents. But these are just 2 terrible wins, man. Great for the short term, terrible for the long term interest of this football team.
Yeah, I do think we'll be seeing Aiden O'Connell as the quarterback next year, unfortunately, for the Las Vegas Raiders, just because they're signing anyone else in free agency. It's like, you're already paying Gardner Minshew. Are you really getting that big of an upgrade from him? And if you're taking someone in the draft, you're not taking one of the top 2 quarterbacks, unfortunately, unless Shedeur says this is the only place I want to play. So, yeah, they're 2 meaningless wins, but those 2 meaningless wins make sure that they're probably not going to be in this year's quarterback crop.
Highlighting some of the top 10 in the mock draft put forth by Josh Edwards today at CBSSports.com. When we come back, we're going to move things a little bit more toward the latter stages of the 1st round. It seems like every week, no matter who we ask to do the mock, it's always Ashton Jeanty to the Cowboys. Right now, that would be the 13th pick in this draft. Also have Michigan tight end Colston Loveland going to the Seahawks at 18. Much more coming up next on Spotlight. Mock Draft Mondays here on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight. A look at the 11 through 20 picks from Josh Edwards. You can find the full 1st round mock at CBSSports.com. Teams here just on the edge of playoff range. Teams like the Colts, who just got eliminated, taking Malaki Starks at number 12, the safety out of Georgia. Josh Edwards is with us, along with Mike Renner and Ryan Wilson. Ryan, I wanted to ask you about the Colts here. How do you prioritize all the needs that you have, especially on defense?
I think Malaki Starks is a great place to start in the middle of that defense. They've had a ton of injuries as well. Jalen Jones has played really well as a second-year player. Juju Brents, their other cornerback, has been banged up and on IR for much of the year. So you get a center fielder in there, and Malaki Starks is a fantastic athlete. I think he adds that dynamism on the back end. You just got to get healthy. You need your quarterback to play a lot better as well, and that's another conversation. Joe Flacco clearly didn't have the juice that he had last year, coming off the couch helping the Browns to get to the playoffs this year. But I think if you're going to take someone in the middle of the first round, there are certainly worse selections than Malaki Starks, who can come in right away and get after it. He has track speed. He can track the ball well down the field. He can come downhill and defend the run. So he's a versatile piece, and he's easily the best safety in this class. He's probably going to end up being one of the best defensive backs.
All right, let's go to some picks that our analysts want to hit on. And Ryan, you wanted to hit on the Falcons pick of Benjamin Morrison, the cornerback, at number 17. What specifically don't you necessarily like about that pick?
I love Benjamin Morrison. The only issue is that he had the hip injury early in the season and didn't play for the rest of the year. He had the surgery, and I just want to see where he is injury-wise, because a knee injury, an ACL, we sort of have a sense for how that works recovery-wise, what the expectations are, timeline, 8, 9, 10 months, and you get back to near full health. Hip injuries are a little different, but coming into the summer, Benjamin Morrison was one of my favorite players, especially at the cornerback position. But if you're the Falcons, you don't necessarily need edge help. Braylon Trice, who they drafted, got banged up before the start of the season. Their edge rusher, Arnold Ebikete's flashing, had a good game last night. They have Matt Judon, of course, the veteran there. So I would focus on the back end, opposite A.J. Terrell. But I just want to make sure that he checks all the boxes health-wise, Benjamin Morrison. If he does, I'm all in on this pick. But if not, I would just consider perhaps some other options before I went and turned that card in.
Yeah, the medical evaluation at the NFL Combine is going to be incredibly important for Morrison and some of these other players that are coming off injury. But I think he has the potential to be one of the best cornerbacks and overall players to come out of this class. So you plug him in next to A.J. Terrell, I think they could have something special.
All right, let's jump into the 20s. And a team like the L.A. Rams, again, overperforming. And, Josh, you have them taking Ohio State offensive tackle Josh Simmons here. Mike, why don't you necessarily like that pick?
One, because to echo kind of what Ryan just said about Benjamin Morrison's injury, Simmons has a major injury that he's coming off of. He tore his patellar in that Oregon game. That's not an inconsequential injury. It may even be more impactful than like an ACL, especially for an offensive lineman, because that's the tendon that fires when you try to anchor against a bull rush. And that's what you got to do a lot of times at the NFL level. So I'm worried about that. But then also the fact that this is where I saw him going, or saw him as a prospect before that injury, based off of only 6 games, right? He only played 6 games and not against great competition, and especially along line play. You want to see guys face top competition because it's just different. The speed, the power, the strength once you get to the NFL. So we never got to see that from him. I loved his tape before that, but it's coming against lesser competition. So having never gotten to see that with that injury, I just don't think the Rams are desperately needing an offensive lineman that bad to pull that trigger, especially when they already have the highest paid offensive line in football. Just using more draft capital to invest in it, maybe not where I'd look to build this roster.
Yeah, Mike is right. I mean, it's absolutely a risk given the limited exposure that we've had to him. And in most draft classes, I would not consider him here because of the injury. But I think it's just kind of a draft class that's lacking overall. So if you have a player that could possibly be one of the better left tackles to come out of this draft class, I think it's worth a risk, even if necessarily we don't know what he's going to look like coming off injury.
Continuing to run through Josh Edwards' first-round mock draft, and we're down to the Steelers, who, again, we've seen it time and time again, taking wide receiver Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State. Ryan, you got to like that just because of the way he would kind of fit the field with George Pickens on the other side.
Exactly, Chris. And George Pickens is the key to all this and making this work. Is Emeka Egbuka number 1 in year 1? No, he probably isn't, but he's a solid number 2, a professional wide receiver. He runs great routes. He doesn't do anything at a 100 if we're doing Madden rings, but he's a 95, and I think that's what helps, because when George Pickens was on the bench with that hamstring injury for the last 3 or 4 games, that offense looked completely different. There was no one creating separation. There was no big play threat down the field, and Emeka Egbuka gives you that outlet on the other side to go along with Pat Freiermuth. And this pick that you're talking about, Chris, it feels sort of like the Najee Harris pick, which was a layup all the way from February until it actually happened for the Steelers a few years ago. This feels like this is going to fall into place where Emeka Egbuka is going to be the consensus pick from now until the actual draft. But I think he feels a huge need in terms of having a solid number 2 to help out Russ Wilson and George Pickens.
I'm glad Ryan feels that it's a layup because I've had him going there for about a month straight. I think he's just a great compliment to George Pickens. He gives them some consistency on that side of the ball. I just think he makes a lot of sense for what the Steelers need to be doing this offseason.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Do it each and every Monday here on HQ Spotlight, Mock Draft Mondays. As the college football season nears an end, some of the top prospects are done now, like a Cam Ward, who raised some eyebrows, only played one half of his bowl game for Miami over the weekend, and Rick Spielman had quite a few things to say about that earlier today here on CBS Sports HQ.